Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's time for my first review of the week, Batman 95, and the beginning of the Joker War, the big Bat Family kind of crossover event that James Tynion has been working towards since he took over the Batman series from Tom King. Bottom line up front, I do recommend this comic, although there are some issues that I will address here in a few minutes. But before we get to that, if this is your first time visiting Thinking Critical YouTube for your comic book reviews and information, have a look around, see if you like the channel, and consider subscribing to Thinking Critical YouTube. If you've been coming back and you've been enjoying the content but haven't taken the plunge, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now is the time. In my opinion, Thinking Critical YouTube features the best group of comic book nerds that you're going to find that come here and collaborate with me. We talk about news, we talk about opinions, and obviously I do review comic books here as well. And definitely give the video a thumbs up because you're going to enjoy this review. Now, just kind of getting to my overall thoughts on this comic. Like I said, I do recommend it. There's some great stuff about this, and it starts with the art. The art in this thing is fantastic. And when you hear me gush about the art, you're going to want me to stop. But I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep laying it on because the art's that good. And I also think Tynion does some good job kind of introducing us back into the story, resetting the stakes and everything like that. But where he really kind of falters in this is there's too much filler, and there's actually too much setup. Like, we've been working up to Joker War in the pages of kind of all the Batman books, and it's time to be into the Joker War. The time for setting up the Joker War has passed, and there's too much setup, and there's definitely a lot of filler in here, which I'll kind of get to, which I think distracted from the story and was kind of a waste of real estate in this particular comic book. And I'll get into my reasons for that why. I'm going to start out with the stuff in this comic I really liked, and I'm going to work my way towards the stuff I kind of liked, and at the end we'll talk about the stuff I just didn't think worked at all. But first, if I'm going to talk about what I liked, it starts with the art by Jorge Jimenez, and the color work by Tomo Mori is absolutely spot on as well. It's like, just look at this. This is why you read comic books. So you can get a picture like this to go with the amazing words to the story. Like, look at this amazing bat wing that's got the Joker smile painted onto it because Batman has obviously lost his fortune to the Joker when he stole all of his money. Now he's got his toys. He's about to kill him with it, and you can just see the fear, the abject terror in Batman's eyes there. Obviously, he is under the influence of some drugs, which we'll talk about in a little bit later, but just an amazing visual. Definitely my favorite thing about this comic book is the art. Jorge Jimenez been described to me as American manga, and I can't sing the praises of American manga enough. Obviously, everyone knows I love the visuals in Sean Gordon Murphy's White Knight universe. His manga influences really add to the flavor, to the tone of Gotham, and it really works here for Jorge Jimenez as well. Obviously, they have distinct styles, but Jimenez is heavily influenced by manga as well, and it really it works for Gotham. They should definitely be I understand why they like to put a lot of like horror or gothic-based artists on Batman books. It fits the vibe, but these amazing manga-influenced artists really fit Gotham and Batman like a glove as well. So hopefully they'll keep doing this more in the future because this looks like $1 million. And this is very emblematic of what you're going to see in this comic book. Just amazing, striking visual after visual. And this might be controversial, but I think this is probably the best illustrated DC comic I've read in a while. This is even better, in my opinion, than what we're seeing in Dark Knight's Death Metal. And I think Greg Capullo is a master. I think his visuals on Dark Knight's Death Metal are fantastic. And I think Jorge Jimenez might actually outdo him here in this issue of Batman. And we know he's going to be here for the full story arc. And I'm very excited about it because he should be a superstar. He should be considered one of the best artists in the industry. Jorge Jimenez is at the top of the heap, in my opinion, and Tomo Mori absolutely fits his work like a glove, and I hope these guys continue working together. Absolutely 2 thumbs up, 5 stars. The art in this comic book is amazing. Now we're going to get into James Tynion's work as far as the scripting goes for this comic book, and I think these pages here illustrate what should have been the beginning of this comic book. There's a portion, and I'm going to talk about it here in a few minutes, where there's kind of a flashback. I don't think it works for this story. This should have been the introduction into this comic book. There's these great news segments where you're getting these talking heads that are really giving good, concise exposition about how Gotham is seeing Bruce Wayne and all the fallout of Joker stealing his money. And it appears that Wayne Enterprises was corrupt and it was tied to Batman, and it's time to tear it down. And the public might be aware that it's Joker, but they're not really sure. And we know that there's a new lawyer that's kind of like the head of the board. His name's Mr. Graves, and we're going to meet him here in a few minutes. And I think that was an excellent way to introduce people into the story, reinforce some of the narratives that we've got going on, and really bring it home. And I think this should have been the beginning. And then we get into the scene with Lucius Fox. We see he's got pins in his head as he's being infected with the Joker toxin, and just drives home that Joker and his henchmen, led by Punchline, are taking everything away from Bruce Wayne. They've taken his money. They've taken his toys. They've taken his estate. They've taken his surrogate son. Rick Grayson now believes that he is the son of the Joker. And now they've taken the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, Lucius Fox. They've infected him and kept him on as the CEO of the new entity of Wayne Enterprises controlled by Joker. Just look at that image. This is why you can't give this comic book to kids. That would scare the bejesus out of my little 5-year-old. That would scare the absolute crap out of him. That scares me. Just look at that face. It's terrifying. There's some more character work in here that I think is really effective, and I liked it a lot. And it happens to be with Mr. Graves, who we're meeting here. He's the guy in the red suit. He's coming up to Wayne Enterprises. It's been cordoned off by the police. Harvey Bullock's up front, and he's kind of dressing him down, saying, Bruce Wayne's not in charge anymore. I'm the head of the board, get out of the way. And I really like the way Harvey Dent addresses him after he starts to talk about my client. He says, is the Joker. And then later he goes, your client stole that company. Your client is a mass murdering piece of garbage, a stain that needs to be wiped off the city and this world. Really powerful words. And it makes me feel like Harvey Bullock's going to have a big part to play in this story as one of the heroic figures. And there's some more back and forth. And then after Mr. Graves enters the building, this is what one of the police officers says to him. He says, Harvey, you're losing this one. But Harvey knows this already. And he says, we're all losing, Whitaker. Harvey knows what's happening. He knows they're in a losing position, but he stood up to him anyway. And I thought that was a nice piece of character work. And then the next part, when Graves walks into the building, he puts on the mask and you realize he's the underboss. Thought that was a really good reveal. Now you kind of understand who he is in this situation, why he has all this information, why he has all these connections. Is because he's heavily connected to the Joker, and he's now been named as the head of the board of Wayne Enterprises, I believe. Very good character work. Really like this. I like how they're kind of slow rolling underboss as a character, using him here and there, not overexposing him like they're doing some of the other new characters. Speaking of characters that are kind of being overexposed, Punchline, she's in the book throughout, but she finally encounters Batman kind of at the end as Batman's looking for one of his safe houses that he's never used. And this safe house is kind of special because this is the one that he was going to use after essentially Gotham became Camelot, where it became the version of Gotham that Bruce Wayne and Alfred had always dreamed of, to where it was safe and had been ridden of all the crime. And this was going to be that safe house that he used, but he'd never been there. She knew that he was going to be coming here. Don't really know that explanation works really well. And then we do get the reveal of this suit. And I know there's been a lot of controversy about this suit. People don't like it. I don't like the look of it either. It doesn't really fit Batman. But when you think about it, there's a conversation. Lucius Fox is kind of on a monitor at this point. He can see what's going on. Batman is confused. He thinks this armor has been built by Lucius Fox. Lucius Fox says, no, I thought you built this. So I think it's quite clear that this armor, if it's real, because I do believe James Tynion said this was from a dream sequence, but it appears to be real here because he's not hallucinating yet, was made by Alfred. And this was meant to be the Batman armor when essentially Gotham became Camelot, became that idealized version that they had hoped for. And this represents kind of the knight in shining armor that Batman would come to represent when he finally rids the city of crime and rebuilds it as a modern city that everyone can, and become a city where everyone would dream to live in, and other big cities around the world would aspire to be more like Gotham. And this would be like his armor when it became Camelot. So I think this armor could actually end up being really important. And if it's used correctly, could actually be kind of cool, but I don't like the look of it here. But I kind of like what it could represent if it's used that way by Tynion, in the script. Now, the part of this I don't like, and it's the way that Bruce Wayne Batman is defeated by Punchline. Now, thankfully, she doesn't just beat the piss out of him in 2 or 3 panels, kind of like she does Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, Harley Quinn. Essentially she murdered her, in like 2 panels. So at least that doesn't happen. She doesn't just beat the hell out of him, but it turns out she's got the most powerful gas in the world. She's combined Joker toxin with Scarecrow's fear toxin with Venom to create the ultimate toxin that no one could withstand except for her, because she's been building up a tolerance, I guess, kind of like the Dread Pirate Roberts in one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride. I don't think this really works. I think they've overpowered Punchline way too much. I think in a few years, James Tynion is going to wish that maybe he had slow rolled this character more in line with what he's done with Underboss, rather than blow his wad so much with her. And just, she's being overexposed, overused. She's taking way too many heroes down, and it's making the character become kind of annoying. I know a lot of people have gravitated to this character and think that she's amazing, but I can see a lot of people actually rejecting this character, kind of like they did with Gotham Girl, because she's being overexposed. She's probably too powerful at this point. I don't think that she probably should have defeated Bruce Wayne Batman this early in her run, in the Batman series. And that's just my opinion. I think a lot of people would disagree. Definitely, if you disagree, tell me why in the comment section below. See if you can change my mind. But I think she's being overexposed, overplayed, way too powerful. But I do think this suit could be cool. And now it's time to kind of get into some of the stuff I think really falls flat. And one of them is there appears to be a lot of copycatting going on with James Tynion's story. Just the visual here, when I saw it, just boom, immediately makes me think of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, when he's looking through that building with his X-ray vision, and he's kind of looking at all the thugs that are working with the Joker in that one. And being nostalgic or reminding people of cool stuff like that every once in a while, I think works. But there are a lot of story beats that are really reminiscent of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises, as well as Tom King's City of Bane, which literally just happened a few months ago. It just concluded. The city has been overtaken by a villain. This time Joker instead of Bane in those 2 stories. How many times are we going to see Gotham overtaken by a villain and Bruce being kind of taken down a peg? And this one, he's lost all of his resources, just like Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. And it feels like James Tynion is probably borrowing a little bit too much from very well-known Batman stories, or in Tom King's City of Bane, a very recent Batman story. Now, if you said, Wes, you got to bet on it, I imagine Joker War will end up being better known than City of Bane, because I think City of Bane kind of ended up being a failure in a lot of ways. And Joker War has a lot more promise. I think this will be known better in the end, but it is very recent till essentially the exact same thing happened. Now let's kind of get into the stuff I was talking about earlier, the filler that happens in this. And this is what actually opens up the comic book. Batman, I guess it's kind of early in his career. He's going to kind of encounter the Joker, and it's one of their first time encountering each other. And James Tynion tries to reframe the relationship between Batman and Joker. And I think with the amount of character history that you have between them, the two, I mean, Joker was literally the very first villain in the very first issue of Batman. It's going to be really hard to do that and for people to even accept it. Here he's talking to Alfred, and he apparently he can't sleep. He's haunted by the visions of the bodies that he found in this chemical plant that had been infected by an earlier version of the Joker toxin, and everyone was dead, and it's kind of keeping him up at night. And at this point, Bruce, says he knows that he and Joker will be fighting till the end of times. They're destined to be fighting each other forever. And it just seems weird. He also says, I can tell that the Joker already knows the next way that he's going to come at me after, I thwart this and he escapes. He's going to do, he knows what he's going to do next. And that doesn't really fit the character. I guess it fits kind of what Tynion's trying to do with the character now, but there's so much character history, specifically with Joker in between these two, that it doesn't really fit. And him trying to kind of recharacterize or reframe the relationship or what Joker has been to Batman all along, if you accept kind of the way that he's trying to reframe the relationship, I'm glad it works for you, but it certainly doesn't work for me. And this feels like entirely filler, almost like James Tynion knew that he was writing Joker War and he had to end it on issue 100 for it to be, so they could be a double size issue and they can charge $10 for it or whatever. So we just threw this crap in here, and it's just filler. It reads like filler. It doesn't feel like anything important. He's trying to change things. It doesn't really work. It all falls flat for me. Like, if you're going to do a story called the Joker War, you are using the most iconic villain in comic books history, and without a doubt, the most iconic villain in Batman's rogues gallery, who he's encountered hundreds of times over and over in comic books. And you kind of just have to accept that history for what it is. And I think you have to kind of play within the framework of that history, and trying to redefine it, I don't think works. And it comes off, like I said, as filler. And it was a terrible way to start the comic book. And it almost made it unenjoyable from the beginning. But I do think he turns it around kind of by the end. And it's an enjoyable read. But this was a terrible way to start, in my opinion. And then the other thing that I thought was filler was when we get the Joker going to the Monarch Theater. That was obviously the theater where Bruce Wayne and his parents were watching The Mask of Zorro. They left early, and his parents were killed in Crime Alley. This theater obviously is very important to Bruce Wayne and the history and lore of Batman. And Joker kind of goes in there. I guess the guy that ran the reel when that night happened, he's still working, but his eyesight is poor. And it turns out Joker wants to buy the theater. Like, it's already been established that Joker is taking everything he can away from Batman. Now, apparently, he's going to take away the theater, or the place that kind of created Batman himself. And I get the symbolism, but there's a lot of pages to this, and it was really, really filler. It didn't really do anything, in my opinion. And then at the end, there's a reveal that everybody in the audience is infected with the Joker toxin. So Joker wants to infect Gotham with it, as far as his war on Batman goes. But I think we already know that, it's the Joker. He's going to infect the entire city. That's what the Joker does. So it didn't feel like he was adding anything new to the story. And we also learn later he's buying all the theaters in Gotham through the underboss. But this felt like filler. It didn't feel like it needed to be in there. It felt like a waste of real estate, and what should have been a really impactful, important story, and just brought the story down, in my opinion. It was kind of boring, to be completely honest. It just, those pieces of what I call filler are definitely the worst parts about this comic book. But like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of good stuff that goes on in here. Just kind of recapping the comic book, I definitely recommend this. This isn't a highly recommend or a highest recommend. This is a recommend. Just for the art alone, it's worth the cover price. There's some really good stuff that's done in here. I thought the news segments and the pictures of Lucius Fox and what was happening to him was really effective. I thought the moment with Harvey Bullock and the underboss was really cool. But there's too much filler in here. And I do think that bat suit that everyone's upset about, I think it has promise of what it could represent as like the knight in shining armor of Camelot when Bruce finally saves Gotham. Obviously, we know that that's not possible. I think Bruce knows. He certainly mentioned it before, that it isn't possible. So that's like the idealized of what Batman could be. And that's kind of what it represented in Alfred's eyes. So I see that armor could become very important and symbolic to the future Batman. But hopefully it won't play in too much more than that, just being more symbolism than something that actually plays a big part in it. But man, that art was kick-ass, and there's some good stuff about here. I'm still excited for Joker War, but I was definitely hoping for something a little bit more exciting and fun. Hopefully we'll get that in Batman 96, and you'll definitely get that review right here on Thinking Critical YouTube. I will be reviewing Empire #2 tomorrow on the channel, and then this Sunday I will be wrapping up the Fantastic Four X-Men story arc from Chip Zdarsky and the Dodsons right here on the channel. I think Nala's going to come in here with me, and we're going to talk it over and kind of talk about the story and what it all means, and kind of where that moves heading forward, if you're interested in that. So thank you for joining me, and that's my review of Batman 95. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.